right, and we are live. Welcome everybody to what is definitely my favorite event of the quarter, our Great Comms Debate, the 6th time we're hosting it, and of course have a panel of 3 amazing speakers again today, but I'll let them introduce them in just a second. Before we go on to some introductions, what we like to do, of course, at the beginning of all these sessions is to see where people are calling in from. So if you're at your desk, you'll see on the right-hand side, you have a little questions tab. Just type in there where you're calling in from. We really like to see where our audience is located. But yeah, I see the first responses are starting to come in. We have like I said, an amazing panel again today. Wow, it's going crazy right now. I can barely keep up with the chat. But guys, thank you so much for joining us. And I think before we get on to today's agenda and the topics we're going to cover, it would be great if you guys could just briefly introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and why you're here today. So Jennifer, how about you get us started?
Sure. So I'm Jen Brown. I'm the Chief Exec of the Institute of Internal Communication, based here in the UK. And what my organisation does is what it says. So we are the professional membership body, so dedicated to representing internal comms. And yeah, we do lots of stuff to help advance and support the profession.
And Jen, you are a returning guest, so always great to have you joining. Love having you in the IOIC on these sessions. Phil, how about you?
Hi Alex, hi everyone. Yes, so I've been doing change and employee comms work for over 20 years, 16 of those in-house, first at O2 and then 12 years at HSBC, where I eventually led the global IC team. Since I left HSBC last year, I've done some comms mentoring and then got back into consulting with Scott McKenzie's team at Montfort Communications. And we specialize in business change comms, employee engagement projects. And right now we're doing a lot of work helping our clients with their thinking and communications around the hybrid workplace and the return to the office. Great to be here.
Thanks for joining. Yeah, we have one of our a spoiler for one of our topics is going to be on the hybrid workplace. So looking forward to hear your input on that. And last but certainly not least, Chloe, welcome. How about you give us a brief introduction as well?
Sure. Thank you for having me. I have been in internal comms for what feels like forever. I've had a series of roles. I started off in First Direct and then moved to O2 where I met Phil. And then had roles in Telefonica and Gladys, and I'm currently looking after internal comms and engagement for Vodafone Business. Vodafone Business counts about 17,000 global employees, and we're based in Spain, Germany, Italy, Portugal, Ireland, USA, Singapore, Lisbon, so all over the place. And Vodafone Business makes about a third of Vodafone's global revenue.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us as well. And yeah, you guys, I guess all of you kind of knew each other beforehand. We were just joking before we got started that the internal comms circle can be kind of small at times, but nice to have you all join us, and nice to have an audience like this right now. Like at first glance, I see South Africa, I see Ireland, Brussels, UK, New York City, California, Taiwan. I've never seen that before. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, great global audience spanning a true global audience here today. So thank you so much for joining us. Of course, if you've been on a Smart session before, you may have heard me speak before. My name's Alex. I'm the marketing director here at Smart, and we are, of course, a employee communications and advocacy platform. But that's enough about us. Let's get into what we'll be covering today. Real quick, some housekeeping items. If you've been to a comms debate before, you probably know how this works. But just as a refresher, we will do 6 statements all around internal communications. Now, for each statement, the way we'll do it is that each speaker will just have quickly, 60 to 90 seconds to agree or disagree, and then briefly state their position on why. before then opening up into a broader discussion on each topic. We will be doing Q&A throughout the session, so you already got kind of accustomed to using the questions tab there. So if at any point you have a question on anything we're discussing or anything that's being covered, feel free to drop it into the questions tab. We'll pick those up as we go along. And of course, feel free to tweet at us or post on LinkedIn with the hashtag GreatCommsDebate. All right, but without further ado, I think we can go ahead and get started with our first topic. I'm excited. We haven't done a comms debate in so long, and I'm ready to go. So let's get into the first one, which reads: internal communication is the only function that can align organizations and employees. Well, we're starting off with a banger here. So, Jen, how about you start us off? Do you agree or disagree?
So I'm going to agree, but I am being open in any debate to being persuaded to disagree with myself. That's the idea of a debate. But I'll tell you why I agree. I mean, alignment is a key issue in organizations. If we're all on that same page, it enables our people to make decisions and make actions that really line up with the overall strategy and priorities of the organization. I think in the last 12 months, we've certainly seen greater collaboration, whether that's between leaders, functions, and people. One of the things which I actually think has been one of the greatest outcomes of the hard times that we've been through. And this has enabled organizations to build greater understanding amongst people. And let's face it, communication, in my opinion, is the linchpin by which we create shared understanding. So as we face the future and we're going to shift the way we work, why we work, embed new strategies and priorities, and try to drive forward on a collective vision and purpose, internal communication, in my opinion, at the moment, again, open to being dissuaded, is uniquely placed to be that bridge. It is the constant in everything that we do. It is the piece of action that's in everybody's day-to-day role. And actually, if we address effective internal communication throughout our organizations, we are going to align people on the same page. Why are we uniquely placed to do that? Well, we are tapped into what the leaders are saying. We're tapped into where the organization is going, and we're tapped into what the people are feeling. So when you know all that vital information, what you can do is spot misalignment. And misalignment can often be because words and actions don't mirror each other, or there's misinterpretation, or there's dialogue that needs to allow that to shift. So where we can come in is to spot that, speak to the leaders, speak to the functions, and address where those misalignments are and bring everybody back on the same page. Because fundamentally, if we're on the same page, we have a shared vision, a purpose, a strategy. If our people know that and our leaders know how they're feeling, we can realign everything. And if we get on the page of alignment, we'll get on the page of organizational success. So that's my quick pitch for an agreement to that statement.
Very, very, very diplomatic. I like how you can be persuaded to go the other way. Chloe, real quick, do you agree or disagree?
I thought I disagreed, but Jen's done a great job of stating the case. I think I disagree with the statement that we're the only function that can align organizations, but I agree with all of Jen's points around the fact that we are uniquely positioned. I think every part of the organisation has a huge part to play. And I think that, for me, internal communications and collaboration are just too big to be left to just one individual or one team. So for me, I'm going to have to agree with Jen, but disagree with the statement.
That's interesting. How do you do that? Phil, how about you? Agree or disagree?
Well, I guess we're all converging on a kind of form of agreement here, because yes, I agree that we are possibly uniquely placed, but we're also highly dependent. So, I disagree with the statement because it's too, black and white. So, organizational alignment for me is a team sport. It requires contributions across the top of the office, multiple functions, frontline employees. Maybe I'm setting the bar very high, but for me, alignment is when everything in the organization is lined up to deliver a new strategy or priority. It starts with the leadership team. So they need to have clarity about that change, what it really means for the organization as a whole. And then if you want that alignment to be sustained over a period of time, the top team is also going to have to think about, resourcing, structure, culture, management systems, incentives. And then the comms team can come along with the campaigns and stories and engagement activities, and they will really resonate because you can see the change all around you. Without that degree of alignment, I'm afraid communications alone fade pretty quickly. I've used the analogy of kind of fireworks in the night sky in the past, if you like that one. So I agree with Jen. Internal comms people have a pretty privileged view on what's going on. They can spot misalignment quickly, and then it's their job to point it out and get the right conversations going. But full fat organization-wide alignment, it is a pretty rare event in corporate life. When it happens, it's very exciting. And I remember my time at O2 in the mid-2000s with Chloe. We had a customer-centric strategy. We got all our ducks in a row, and it was very, very powerful.
So thanks, guys, for sharing those thoughts. And I guess now, want to open it up for a few minutes of open discussion here. But Jen, hearing the responses of your co-panelists, do you now change your response to being a full agreement to kind of just a slight agreement, or where do you stand?
I agree that the statement is too black and white to be agreeable. And in terms of, as I said, being open, I think that, I'm open to be, no one can take ownership for everything in its wholeheartedness. It has to be about collaboration. And I think my earlier point as well is that one thing that I think that, but also with internal communicators, where I think it's a good debate to have, is that we need to play a stronger role at spotting and misaligning and bringing people together, not just sitting back and hearing it and not taking an action. Whether that action is comparable to us, that's not, I think, what I'm saying. So, and I think that one of the great things that we've had over the 12 months is, and the more I'm talking to other associations and cross disciplines, is we're all sort of going, maybe we should chat more, maybe we should all get on the same page. And I think that's a really good outcome. And so I do agree that, yes, can we own it? No. But do I think we need to do more and could do more to take a leading role in helping with alignment and spotting misalignment and embedding good practice of communication through better support? Yes.
Right.
So I'm kind of on the fence and with myself.
So I would add, often comms teams are misused to force alignment, which isn't there, in substance, in the hearts of minds of maybe senior people. And we come along and just drive through a set of messages. Without that alignment, they're going to be unraveling pretty quickly. And being replaced by something better. So it's important that we actually do a lot of work before the comms is released to force the conversations that need to happen to get that clarity on your intent.
Right.
Everyone in a position of influence signs up to.
Right. And I really I know we should already be moving on to the next topic, but I wanted to bring out this question from Sarah because it's such a great one in the chat. That how do we as internal communications influence alignment when some stakeholders don't see the value? Have you guys come across this where, alignment obviously is a key topic, but have you come across issues where some stakeholders don't see the value in alignment and how to influence that if there's a case like that? Anyone can jump in.
Well, yes, I have. But I don't want to talk over my colleagues here. As I said, I think we are used and abused at times, and it doesn't do our reputation any good if we are used by stakeholder A to force something that stakeholders A, B, C, and B, C, and D haven't really signed up to. So that's really, really important. And if stakeholders B, C, D see that, they take maybe a kind of a view on us, which is not helpful for the long term. So I think we need to stay honest with execs. Speak truth to power, as they say, and say, look, I don't think other of your colleagues are as on board as they need to be for this to land well.
Right.
I would, and I'd just say I would agree, and I think I would just add that I have seen it, and it's difficult, and sometimes being an internal communicator, it's our role is to be a bit of a marriage guidance counselor and broker, and understand where those differences to help bring people together, and that takes effort, it takes conversation, and as Phil says, it takes honesty, and replaying all of that, and it's delicate, but we can go forth and try our best.
Right. All right, guys, we've already spent a good chunk of time on this. I think it's time to keep the show rolling and move on to. Oops, sorry, Chloe. I put you front and center rather than the statements. Hope you don't mind that. But we can keep the show rolling and go on to the second statement, which reads: "It's not internal communication; it's internal collaboration." And now, Chloe, since I put you front and center there first, maybe you can get started off with what, do you agree or disagree with the statement?
I think I disagree, but I'm being a little bit provocative with this one. I think I'm starting to see lots of blogs and lots of posts around this topic, so I think it's a really good one to just have a bit of a chat about. For me, collaboration is the action of bringing people together and working together to create something, whereas communication is different. It's the way an organization interacts with its people and how its people interact back with it. So I think internal comms is about creating that shared understanding and shared meaning, and collaboration is maybe working together on the journey to get there. But I'm starting to see collaboration being a bit of a catch-all, and it's great to work together. Of course, everybody would love to collaborate, and collaboration within an organization is absolutely vital. But for me, a lot depends on the culture. Sometimes it's really easy to collaborate with different teams, different countries, different areas. Other times it's just not that easy. So I think for me, internal comms plays a role in helping to facilitate and bring an organization together. But collaboration does not, for me, replace the internal communication skill set.
Gotcha. All right. How about Phil? Agree or disagree?
Yeah, well, this question kind of brings out the student philosopher in me, because it's pretty cryptic and pretty conceptual. So, I would restate it as, so take internal communicators. What are they doing in organizations? I think they're doing much more than just facilitating collaboration. So if there's a choice between the two, I'd choose internal comms every time, because it gets collaboration into the mix. It's part of the bundle of successful internal communication. So for me, the scope of internal comms is to kind of inform, inspire, and involve employees, and then mobilize them around clear, business goals. Having achieved that, and if you have clear goals and you do the comms piece really well, then you can build a very powerful movement for change. You can involve your culture, you could shift your strategy, you can integrate an acquired company. If you do your communications well, then everything goes in the same direction, feeding off each other, building off each other, and you can make a real difference. Collaboration, by contrast, is a much narrower concept. It's maybe one behavioral element in what you want to change, and clearly being collaborative is really important, because no one team or function can deliver something really significant on their own. And I think actually internal comms sets the context for collaboration in articulating a goal that everyone kind of signs up to and gives some focus to. Without that reference point, collaboration just drifts around, being helpful. So that's, I think, my interpretation of that one.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think, I already see some people in the chat kind of with that same sentiment. Jen, how about you? Do you agree or disagree?
I, as the Institute of Internal Communication, I feel it's my duty and right to disagree, but for very much the reasons that both Chloe and Phil have stated. We describe the purpose of internal communication to inform, connect, and help people become purposeful. It's multifaceted. I think we have to be careful when I think the last 12 months have brought out that sense of community in us all, and this role as internal comes to help enable those things of collaboration and communication and community and dialogue. And I think dialogue dialogue's becoming really an important way. But we still have a fundamental role to inform, to give clarity, to show direction, and to help all those things. So I think we sometimes have to be really careful. You know, we always sometimes have this need to rebrand things, but let's be careful. But for me, collaboration is about a behavior. It's an outcome of something that we might do or that we might help to create. But to say that that's the future, no, because I don't always want to be collaborated with. Sometimes I just want to be purely informed, and that's good.
You bring up a good point, which is like, we don't always want to collaborate. Sometimes we just kind of need the information and go on with our lives. But you know, Chloe brought up a good point at the beginning, which is like there's starting to be more and more, you know, blogs and articles and chatter about these two topics, and sometimes I've seen them used, you know, almost synonymously, like, you know, the communication equals collaboration. So I'm glad we're having this this chat now. So basically, you guys would agree that you can't so essentially you, in order to collaborate, you must communicate, but you don't necessarily need to collaborate off the back of communication.
It's all about the objectives, all about the clear goals that you're trying to create with what you're trying to do. And sometimes that outcome will be collaboration, sometimes that will be informity, and having that clarity is that. But it's one of the things that we're there to help create, but it's not the sole thing we're there for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's Nikki brought up a good point here. Collaboration can also be dangerous without effective communications. Do you guys have any like horror stories on where people have just started collaborating on stuff without, you know, having a communications function that like gave them the information they needed to collaborate with? I'd love to hear some war stories if you have any.
I can't think of any, if I'm being honest. I think a lot of people set off with great intentions, and maybe an internal comms team could have helped shape or deliver a better outcome. But I haven't got any horror stories that I can share. Sorry.
I think the horror story for me is when an organization is so siloed that it thinks kind of one-on-one collaboration with someone outside that function is in some way sinful or counterproductive. And I've seen that, you know, particularly, you know, across the boundary between comms and HR or comms and marketing.
Yep.
And that preciousness, you know, drives me up the wall, because actually to make great things happen in organizations, you need cross-functional collaboration. So I just don't get the kind of the suspicion of that. It doesn't get us anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess the true kind of horror then is when you limit people's ability to collaborate. That, I mean, we hear about cross-functional collaboration all the time, but how many actually live it? All right, I think we've covered this one pretty thoroughly. We can keep moving and go on to topic number 3. Guys, there's like almost like a mini comms debate going on in the chat as well. I know, like you guys as speakers, you probably don't have time to read everything, but it's great. You'll have a transcript of all this once it's done. All right, but yeah, let's move on to statement number 3, which reads, "More pace, less polish is a rule we should adopt in the post-pandemic comms world." And now, Phil, how about you get us started off with this one? Do you agree or disagree?
Well, I do agree. I brought it to the party, and you know, full disclosure, some history here. Jen involved Chloe and I in a task force last year to help the profession on COVID comms, you know, pandemic comms.
Yeah.
And this was one of the kind of general sentiments in the group, that in the task force, that the pandemic has given us license as internal communicators to get things done without excessive approval loops, with the needs of the audience uppermost rather than the approvers. We were also empowered to release work in draft form, in progress, for consultation. And you know, when I say work in progress, I mean pretty rough drafts, because pace was so important. The only way we were able to respond to the crisis in real time is to work on that kind of rough draft form basis. There was no time to wait for multiple sign-offs. So I think, you know, I put it out there that I advocate keeping that habit alive as a kind of permanent reset. When we eventually get through this, let's keep control of the pace with which we work and don't slide back into cumbersome approval chains. There's a second part to this, which is about the polish, so more pace, less polish. I think the pandemic has kind of lessened our appetite for communications polish. People have experienced something of such kind of far-reaching impact that they just crave authenticity, adult to adult interaction. They can see, corporate polish a mile off and rail against it. The window on real life has been opened and can't be shut. So, Hollywood production values in internal comms seem now a bit grandiose, a bit impersonal, out of kilter with the times. There is an exception, because this is a role that always has an exception. Less polish, unless a piece of communications needs polish to achieve its desired outcome. I'm thinking of something going to a regulator, or a really complex piece of work like guidance on hybrid working, or something that projects your brand to potential new hires, on LinkedIn or other social platforms. Polish is then the extra quality threshold we need to hit, because the comms demands that.
Right.
Otherwise, just leave it be.
That was a great thing you said. Like Hollywood style editing on your comms is something we should try to avoid now. Jennifer, how about you? Do you agree or disagree?
I agree. And very similar again, with what Phil said. I think that one of the great things of this post-pandemic world for internal communicators was that we are more trusted. And actually it's removed that sign off. So actually, because they've seen the value of what we're doing, and certainly I think the outcomes in comms that have been the best outputs for, that you can't put the lid back on, is emotion, empathy, humanity. You can't suddenly go back to becoming, well, I've been here without my tie on and I'm talking to you, and here's my dog, and isn't he lovely, and we're all in it together, to suddenly then sort of putting that back on and making it all seem glamorous and dispersonal. To do that, I think would do that. And we also know in internal comms, as a result of this, there is huge cultural change now happening in organizations, where we're really trying to embed that tonality and that change. So I think it is definitely more pace, less polish when it comes to just being authentic and real with ourselves. I do agree, though, sometimes you will need polish, because it depends, again, very much on your outcome. And that's why we need to have really strong strategies. We need to understand what's the continuum. I think the continuum of communication is authentic, human, emotion. Let's talk to each other. That's what will help it. Then there's some things that might be, sort of moments in time, whether that's you're trying to get people to change your behavior to be, cyber secure, where you really have to invest in some of that polish to try and get that thing that gets people over the line, or you're doing something different. There will always be a less in case point, but I think certainly less sign off is something I think we hope to stay within, because I think that does help.
Right. How about you, Chloe? Do you agree, disagree?
Yeah, I agree, but I think there's also a little bit of a balance. So for me, you start with the data, focus on what the audience needs, and make the answer timely. So I'm all about the pace, but at the same time, I think since before the pandemic, the rise of the smartphone and social media meant that we all consumed our news and our information differently. And I think our attention spans have got shorter. So if you've got a few minutes between one meeting and another, and you reach for your smartphone, and you have a choice: do you go Sky News, do you go Workplace? For me, people are time poor, and you've got to make sure that your content can be as sticky as what the news are putting out, what BuzzFeed's putting out. So I think there's definitely a balance. And I think the other thing that we should have in the back of our minds is around, we are communicating our brand internally as well. And if you want to create that emotional connection with employees to the point where people care and they believe in the brand, for them to work harder and be more loyal, you need to put the time and the effort and the energy in. So I think there's a balance. So I'm kind of on the fence. I agree that we should be beyond the days of ridiculous rounds of sign off, and we should be able to move quickly. But I do think that at the same time, we should still be consistent with our offerings internally.
Right, and I think there's this brings up another good point, because I also saw, I think it was Leo in the chat was talking about how for Leo, less polish implies a lack of do care with respect to tone and professionalism, but maybe still, of course, there still needs to be a certain level of polish on the actual message. You can't, send out whatever, but the sign off cycles, I think, is something important that you guys brought up. But where do you draw the line then?
Well, I think, not at the expense of quality.
Right.
To directly answer Leanne, I think it's Leanne's point there. It's really about over-engineering comms to the point where it feels a little bit like a marketing product for the outside world, when its primary purpose is internal. That feels now, it's not going to work. Arguably, it didn't work 2 years ago. It's certainly not going to work now because we've moved on.
There's also a concern, and I'm interested to hear what you guys think on this, but there have been some concerns on if you overly polish your messages, you risk losing some of that brand authenticity. And I know you're talking especially about brand and how the brand gets portrayed. Is that a real risk in communications? Because of course in marketing we talk about it all the time. Like, you need to project a brand, you need to be on brand, you need to communicate on brand. Is there a risk of over polishing and polishing your brand out essentially if you do that?
Yeah. Absolutely, there's a risk of that, without a shadow of a doubt. And it's finding that balance and making your communications authentic. They have to be authentic, otherwise you're just participating in corporate spin, and that's not what we should be about.
Right. It's I think the whole point about marketing. In marketing, we talk about this in comms. It's the same, but often we consider things as a momentum game, like being able to quickly push out, and especially we're talking about when in the context of the pandemic, things change on a dime, and you need to be able to get messages out quick. So I think this is something we can all take away from here. All right, guys, I think, again, in the interest of time, let's keep the show rolling and move on to statement number 4. And statement number 4 reads, internal communication is still underfunded and under-resourced. And Jen, maybe you can start us off with this one. Do you agree or disagree?
I half agree with myself. If that makes any sense. So when I say this statement, I don't believe this statement can be made true for every organization. And yes, I think the last 12 months have been extreme circumstances. And to say that we are the only function that had to deal with an overwhelming volume of work that we have never known before, I think would be very unfair on other functions as well. But all that being said, when we look at what happened, and and I've looked at my surveys, I've looked at the dialogue and the conversations that I'm having with members and professionals in the community. The COVID pandemic, yes, led to, I think 71% of our members said that they have felt a significant increase to their workload. As I say, that probably can be a true statistic for many, many other professions. We're not alone in that. But one of the things I think that we can certainly say is that, and what the sentiment that's really coming through to me, is the greater reliance now being placed on what we're doing. It's like suddenly, when people see us, they see the value. Now I'm getting more phone calls, I'm getting more help me with this, I'm getting more pressure to do the right thing and do the things like that. So then you kind of go, well, that's great. That's great. And I think we all welcome that as a profession, and we're glad for that. But when we look at the data, particularly if you look at what's coming out in the State of Sector report, in 2019, we saw an uplift in resource, largely in headcount, as opposed to financial budget. But then if you look at this year's State of the Sector, that has now stabilized. So if you want more greater reliance and you want more good output, we're having, on average, I think about 2 people, 1.5 people per 1,000 workforce in internal comms, is not going to be enough to facilitate the new world that we're going to be working into. So we do need more resource, we do need more funding, and just spending more on digital channels doesn't solve the problem. It's human capital that's going to solve the problem. Those will enable the solution. And so for me, in many organizations, yes, we do need more funding.
I want to come back to that after the other panelists have had a chance to answer. I'm interested in hearing what is the magic number, and I'm sure that'll be contextual to each organization. But let's do a quick round first. Chloe, do you agree or disagree with the statement?
It's back to that. There's a black and white statement, isn't it, really? So yeah, I'm sure some internal communications team are underfunded and under-resourced. I'm sure others aren't. So yes and no in a nutshell. But I think we sometimes have to turn the mirror on ourselves and look at where we're spending some of our resource. And in my career, I've definitely seen where well-intentioned people have filled gaps that aren't necessarily internal comms responsibilities. And I'm a firm believer in demonstrating the power of internal comms, but if we continue to dilute our internal comms skills and get drawn into being tech support or ordering the food for a conference and stuff like that, I just think we dilute what we're offering. We're filling a gap, and we aren't really managing our resources carefully, and we're taking away from what we should be leading on. So for me, our skills should be put towards, strategy and planning and influencing and advising and helping people, coaching people to be better communicators, facilitating great conversations. But that said, I'm all for being very careful and considered in how you spend your IC pound. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you have to be really careful. But I'm always fascinated by the emphasis that I think are put on internal comms teams to work creatively, but on a shoestring. And I think sometimes we don't help ourselves in that. So if you're setting off already with one arm tied behind your back, it's a huge challenge to meet the high expectations that any exec team will have of an internal communications function. So I think we need to look at ourselves and how we're spending our resource.
Right. Talking about kind of growth hacking for internal comms. I think I'm going to coin that. Phil, how about you? Do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I think it's really difficult to talk about this in the abstract. I think it's very situational. I think now, if you're coming off the back of a good crisis, forgive me if I say that, but if you felt that through the pandemic, your stock has risen as a team, and you're getting access to the meetings you need, you're being listened to, you've got greater influence, then now is the time to have that conversation about budget, because you've got some leverage, you've got some strength in your negotiating position. And only have that if you feel that you're not sufficiently resourced or funded to cover the absolute basics really, really well, to meet the needs of your organization. So rather than kind of repeat what my esteemed colleagues have just said, I want to take this down a different route and actually look at the practical ideas. If you're in a position right now where you feel really under-resourced, but you also feel like having that conversation, difficult conversation, then 7 steps to heaven, right? Step 1, find a powerful sponsor. Step 2, talk about the impact of your work in the language of the business. So what does the team positively influence that the business really cares about most, and couch your team's work in that language. Step 3 is know where the fans are, being quite kind of straight up about it and what they're being used for, and then tag your work to that. That might sound cynical, but other areas of organizational life do that a lot, and I think it will release some funds that maybe you didn't think were accessible to you, because you connect your team's work with that funding pool. Step 4 is maybe pull back on servicing multiple stakeholders. So if you're wary that you'll get nowhere with asking for more, then accept what you've got and work within a give-it budget. How do you do that? We'll pull back on some stakeholder support. Maybe had that conversation with your sponsor or the CEO to force rank which stakeholders need my team's service support and which don't. That will actually surface in their eyes that prioritization is a big part of your job. So share that prioritization task with them. The next step is make better use of technology. If you're not invested in a mass mail tool, or what can you do with Teams, with Google Docs? I think technology does now It's coming more and more on stream, and it takes some of the admin burden off stretch teams. And then, I'm nearly there. So think laterally about your resource pool. So, you needn't add headcount. If you take someone from a graduate program or a student placement, enlist some influencers, take a project approach to your work and use other people outside the comms function in your project team. And then finally, if push comes to shove, then teach your clients to fish, so toolkits, templates, move to the self-service model, and do less yourself, but service other people to do their own internal comms. That comes with risks, of course, but that would be my kind of soup to nuts approach to dealing with a funding challenge.
Mm-hmm. And that's I can almost hear the people's pens writing those down in the audience.
I was trying to record it because I was like, that's exactly what I wanted to capsulate. So if we can get that written down somewhere to share with that would be great.
I'm sure someone on our team is writing it down. And of course, again, to mention to everybody in the audience, these will all be recorded and you'll get a recording of it later. But Phil, you mentioned something at the end there, and I'm interested to hear the take of Jen and Chloe as well. The last point, which was, teach people to fish. We talk so much about the importance of enabling line managers or enabling other people to do their own internal communications. Is that something you guys stand behind as well?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Internal communication doesn't happen with one person. Communication is owned by everybody, and the more we can do to enable and support people, and sometimes for some people in line managers, it's not a place of comfort for them. And asking them to do things that are other things. So, to be that support and to be that coach, I absolutely, we can't take away people's voices. They exist everywhere.
Right. Exactly. All right, guys. Well, I think, we got 18 minutes left and we got 2 whole statements to cover. So let's keep it rolling. There's so many great questions in the chat that I'd like to get to. Maybe we can do like a follow-up newsletter on all the questions that remained unanswered. That'd be fun. But yeah, let's keep it going and go to statement number 5, which reads, to get in on internal communications, you have to be a jack of all trades. Now, Chloe, how about you start us off with this one? Agree or disagree?
I think I agree these days. I think I've started to see the role of internal communications change considerably over the last few years. And I think if we take a minute to step back and think about all of the things that our teams are look to for delivering. If I think about generically people, we're expected to understand behavioural science and be able to help and coach and counsel. If I think about what the business expects of us, we've got stakeholder relations, we've got crisis management, we've got reputational management. In technology, we're all expected to get to grips with the various different social networks that are being rolled out, channel management, comms software, Phil mentioned, the tools that enable you to send out mass emails. And then you're looking at your measurement and your research and your analytics and your presentation skills and data visualization. That is just a huge mass of different skill sets that all come under the internal comms umbrella. And I think for me, you could easily try and be brilliant at everything. And I'm sure many people would succeed. I probably wouldn't. So I think for me, it comes down to what's the purpose of the team. So where are you best adding your value and what's been asked of you as a function? So what are the priorities set down with the senior leadership team, with the CEO? What do they expect from you? And I think we should be clear on what a team does and equally what they don't do. Because back to the resourcing piece, if you try and be everything to everyone, despite best efforts, you're probably not going to succeed every time. So I think there is definitely a little bit of we're becoming more and more skilled, but at the same time, we have to be more and more focused.
Yeah. Well, if you try to please everyone, you end up pleasing no one. It's a common rule of thumb.
And it's a really exposing problem to have, isn't it? So when internal comms get it wrong, everybody can see, for sure.
Yeah. Phil, how about you? Do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I've come at this question in a different way, really, for kind of individual career progression, career progression for the individual in our world of internal comms. So I think if you're progressing in this world, yes, you need to be a jack of all trades. I agree with that. Versatility, self-sufficiency, really helpful. If you can do a bit of everything, then it opens up many more opportunities for career progression, particularly the kind of contract programmatic comms roles that we see, are plenty on LinkedIn.
Right.
It's also important as you push forward your career to have a very broad view of corporate comms. Internal comms is not delivered in a vacuum. It's part of the holistic experience of comms internally and externally with customers, regulators, as well as employees. So, learn around the edges of internal comms, and you'll be, a better internal communicator for that. But what's interesting is that at a certain level of seniority, the skill requirement pivots from, getting things done by yourself to getting things done through others. So people management becomes a key skill. Yep. And again, similar shifts from kind of production focus to advisory focus, or from tasks to tasks and relationships. And at the very highest end, the other kind of skill requirements kick in: high level judgment, managing other senior people, speaking truth to power, understanding governance, and your input at big scary board meetings. So, all in all, you have to be a jack of all trades, but also a dynamic learner, not a static jack, but a dynamic jack. Maybe that's the one skill that you need to be master of to kind of complete the phrase. It's about learning and self-development. If you're good at that, if you've got mastery over your own learning, then I think that pops off and you will get on.
You have to be a dynamic jack. I love that. To all the jacks in the audience, hoping that you're dynamic. Jen, how about you? Do you agree or disagree?
I disagree with the statement, but I agree with a lot of what's been discussed. And I think because you have to be really careful as you approach this in terms of what reputation as a function you want to create for yourself within an organization. And yes, I think, we talk at IOIC, we put forward all the skills and knowledge and behaviors that you need to accumulate, and they are vast. But we often say to any member or anybody looking to progress internal comms, you don't have to do everything in detail. You don't have to be an expert in everything, because that's sometimes not everyone's skill. It's also not what everybody wants to do. But if you're going to lead a good function, you need to make sure you're delivering across this framework. And it is as you go up that chain, as well as Phil's and Chloe as well talked about, is, look, my day job is I'm a chief exec, so I know a lot, but I also am, I'd say, an expert in nothing. But when you get up, it's about understanding the landscape, understanding the business, understanding how to influence, understanding finances, understanding people, and being able to understand where good skills are and where the expertise is required. And this kind of links back a little bit to my previous thing around under resource. And I think what we need to be careful of when we think about building our functions, this is the destiny that we can own for ourselves. And those arguments and those steps that Phil's put forward is, do we want a profession where there's just 5 internal comms managers? Or do you want to build a function where there's your internal comms director, there's your change management consultant, there's your business partner, there's your digital expert, there's your strategic measurement expert? And I think, so if you take HR or other functions, you've got your L&D team, you've got your employee relations team. So that's where we need to be thinking about building our resources, and as leaders to step back and build that expertise in our functions, and to exist and understand how that all joins together when you're at sort of the helicopter view of life. So I think if you want to progress, you have to have an understanding of everything. But also I think we need to create a profession where there's opportunity and there's expertise in many, many places. Because that's, I think, what's going to be the thing that changes what we do at the top.
Right. Because something you said actually in the previous section, Jen, was about the number of people in comms teams to communicate to a certain amount of people. And when you start talking multinationals, there are a bunch of different, like you start getting into all these technical requirements, like being able to run platforms and being able to do analytics really detailed. So I guess, at some stage, there is we kind of need to be a jack of all trades, but there is still room to be like an expert in one area, which brings me to what I was going to ask, like real quick. We got to go to the final statement as well. But if you guys had to choose your top skill, and I know it's really hard to pick the top skill, what would it be for an internal comms person? Maybe we can keep going the same round. So Chloe, you got us started. What would be your top skill?
Well, there's so many, aren't there? I think complete measurement, being able to demonstrate success.
That links back to being able to, we talked about being underfunded. There are questions about not making money. It could be that if you can prove your worth, maybe you get more funding. Phil, how about you? What would be your top skill?
Well, I've mentioned kind of curiosity to keep learning and developing, but I think empathy is number one.
Yep.
Put yourself in other people's shoes. It is absolutely essential for the work we do.
Yeah. How about you, Jen?
At the top, it would be to influence and to advise, and it is personal relation skill, because and then you would create all the tools that would help you to do that, but really being able to influence and advise and build successful relations.
Right. So we have measure, we have influence, and we have empathy. I think that's a good line of three to take away from this. Of course, again, it's impossible to choose just one. But
Karen made a really good point in the chat. She said listening.
Listening.
I wish I'd said that. If I could rub out my answer, Karen's got it nailed.
Yeah, I like how you commented there. I wish I had thought of that. All right, guys, but I think we can go ahead and move on to the last statement. I gave a bit of a spoiler at the beginning to this one, and it's on the hybrid workplace. So the last statement reads, in a hybrid workplace, managers need to rethink completely how they motivate and communicate with their teams. Phil, how about you get us started? Do you agree or disagree?
I do agree. I think the first big global experiment was remote working last year. We're about to embark on the second, hybrid working. And we've been thrust into that. As managers of teams, we have to make choices in how to make it work for us. And it's not easy. The HR department won't have all the answers, and all the policies in the world won't tell you how to square conflicting hybrid work preferences within your team. Hybrid teams are difficult to manage. It's about integrating two very different models, office working with remote working. And in doing that, ensuring that everyone is treated fairly, has equal access to career opportunities, and can be productive. The fundamentals of good people management or team management are constant. Set clear direction, listen well, give good feedback, show care, build trust. But in a hybrid team, managers are going to have to grapple with some new scenarios and challenges. And I think what I'm reading now, and there's so much on this, from Gartner, from Microsoft earlier this week, from all the consultancies, big and small, and we've got a point of view on this as well at Montfort. Provide some structure for your team across the week and the month, so people have a little bit of certainty about what's happening when, and where they can schedule things in with certainty. Set parameters to working hours. And interesting what Citigroup has done this week with, I think Channel 4 did the same, just banning Zoom meetings on a Friday. Pretty punchy stuff. And plan for shared presence in the office, because, I think we've all experienced, maybe not yet, but, I have recently in my team, having joined Montfort as a remote worker, it took me 2 months to actually meet my boss and meet my team. But when we did, it was fantastic. And so, shared presence is important. We can't really get to know people fully without actually seeing them face to face. So a lot rests on the manager to set the right tone, tune into what each individual wants and needs from a hybrid setup, it's then for them to exercise their judgment on what appears to be the best approach for the team as a whole, and also in serving the business.
Right, right. I love that. How about you, Jen? Do you agree or disagree on the hybrid workplace?
I do agree. I do agree. I think what we're looking at is a new future. It's about choice and trust, and enabling that within our organisations and within our people, as well as then enabling, the right mechanisms and structures behind all of that. I think we have to expect trial and error and be okay with that, and be open to allow our managers to make mistakes and to learn new lessons and to try new ideas. Because I think it's going to take a while to work that out, but because we are in danger of not having a fair way of working, of not having a divisive workforces, and that's going to be something we're going to have to work really, really hard to not perpetuate. And our managers will be linchpin. They're the most trusted organisation. They're the person that often in someone's everyday will make them feel good or bad about themselves or what they're doing, or make them know what they should be doing. So they are absolutely the critical linchpin to what we're going to do. So we need to help them. We need to advise them. We need to give the right structures, the right place. We need to allow trial and error. We need to allow choice and trust. We need to have structure, but we've got to help them with the ability to have dialogue with their people, because like I say, we're all communicators. We're naturally empathetic, listening, curious people. Management hasn't often got there because of their communication skills. So they're in a hard place. So we need to work with them and give them the support that they need.
Right. Chloe, how about you? Agree or disagree?
I agree with everything that's been said. I think our line managers have always been our number one channel, and we've probably not done enough to support them. And now more than ever, they need our help to equip them to really overcome some completely new challenges that we couldn't have foreseen. Add to that we might not be able to travel for some time, so getting to see global colleagues is going to be difficult, and bringing people together is going to be a challenge, and that's beyond our control. But how do we continue to work together to onboard people really well, make sure that they have a great experience? I mean, I was so impressed with what Vodafone did in turning its whole organisation to becoming a digital way of working. It worked beautifully, but I'm not sure every organisation had that great experience. So what can we all be doing to help and support each other? So what can I be doing to help other organisations that maybe haven't had it as easy? And that collaboration piece, I think, is really important. So we're all learning from each other, because we have no idea what's around the corner. If we've learned nothing, it's that we don't have all the answers, and that we should continue to support each other and share ideas.
Right. And Karen had a great point in chat here, which is we need to ensure the right people are managers and have dual career tracks, so that managers aren't just managers and to be promoted, but they're also there to motivate and communicate. So I love that sentiment. I think maybe, one thing that, at least when we talk hybrid workplace and we talk, communication in general with this hybrid, when we're not face-to-face all the time, it becomes really hard to communicate some nuances that you communicate when you do face-to-face, like stuff like tone, like think sarcasm. It's super hard to, not that sarcasm has a place in the workplace, but anyway, like the tone in which you communicate. And I think that's where the hybrid workplace model and that consideration really comes into play. All right, guys. Well, I think we're approaching the top of the hour, and we've had an amazing session thus far. I wanted to move on to kind of the closing remarks. Before I do that, what I'm going to do is, of course, we at Smart, we host sessions. We host sessions every month. Our next session is already published on our website. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a button right now on your screen to our next session, which is on actually how a Smart customer used our platform to 5x their investment on the platform. Now, it's interesting to see that communicators are also getting into the topic of employee advocacy. So do join us if you have the chance. Don't worry, if you click that button, you won't leave us. You'll still be here to hear the closing remarks. But yeah, that'll happen next month. But with that said, guys, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure having you. And like, I loved looking at the chat today because people were debating amongst themselves. People were giving each other help, giving each other support, sharing resources. It was just amazing to see. So thank you as well, all of you who joined us today. Guys, any last closing remarks before we sign off?
I think just thank you so much for having us, and there's still a lot to come. There's a lot to deal with. There's a lot going on, and just wishing everybody that's listening the best of luck in in how we go forward.
Likewise, thank you for having us. I've enjoyed every minute of it, and thank you to everybody who's been pinging us. I've been trying to read them, but I haven't been able to read them all. But thank you to everybody who's asked questions and participated.
And I'll say thanks to you, Alexander, and also Anita, for getting us here. It was a bit of a struggle for me to get onto the stage an hour and 10 minutes ago, but I made it, and thanks to you guys for creating this platform. And if anything I've said resonates and you want to get in touch, please ping me an email, and we'll get talking about it. I love this stuff.
Yeah. For everybody that wasn't here to hear the beginning, Phil got on just a few minutes before we went live due to some technical difficulties, but we're all here. We all made it. Thank you all for joining. If you want to get in touch with any of the speakers, information is on the screen. And of course, if you want some more information on SMARP and how we can help solve some employee and improve your employee communications, do check us out at smarp.com. With that said, thanks everybody for joining, and we will see you all at the next one. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
See you later. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.